Hello, welcome back to another live stream. I know I said in the last one that I would be doing them weekly, and that was a couple weeks ago, so obviously I failed on that. Um, but I thought I'd take a couple minutes and just kind of give you an update on what's going on behind the scenes. I got a great comment on the last one that suggested maybe doing these videos bi-weekly on the off weeks for the podcast, and so maybe we'll try that. A big part of that is going to be boiled down to my schedule, and it's been pretty busy for me lately, and we can kind of go over that. But um, so yeah, on the show, the last episode that went live is "Catcher Was a Spy," which is the story of Mo Berg. Hopefully, you listened to that and enjoyed that. Um, the next episode on the producers feed that's going to go out live on Monday is Allied. So I thought it would be kind of fun with "The Catcher Was a Spy." That was just a fascinating story. I thought where Major League Baseball catcher becomes a spy for the U.S. government during World War II. And then after after that, kind of staying in that same theme of World War II spies, I thought Allied would be a great movie to follow up with that because even though that is it's a fictional story, but it's set during World War II and spies during World War II, and there's not to spoil it, but there's a little bit of a little nugget in there that may uh, hint at it being a little less fictional than we may think. Um, but yeah, so that's going to be coming out on Monday. And then just to kind of get you up to speed on other things that are coming out too, I've started doing research for the next episode after that. And that's going to be a big one. That's one of the highest requested episodes that I've ever had on the show. And it was one. Um, well, I'll just come out and say it. It's Bohemian Rhapsody. I was going to kind of lead into it, but yeah, when that movie came out at the end of last year, I got inundated with requests for it, and it was one that I had on my radar and I wanted to do, but I didn't get a chance to do it before the movie, and so doing it after the movie, I would have to do kind of a, or to do it right, I would have to do kind of a, the normal comparison. And that's really hard to do for movies that are in the theater because, well, I typically will take, say, a 2 hour movie will typically take me about 5 hours to watch, and I'll take up to 20, 30 pages of notes for during that time. Um, and that means a lot of stopping, pausing, rewinding, stop, look at that frame and see what that sign says, or, if to kind of indicate time or period or wherever that may be, to really make sure that I capture everything and the questions that I'm asking, even though I don't get to go into every single bit of detail because I want to boil it down to, half hour, 45 minutes or so. Um, I want to make sure that those details that I do cover are ones that are kind of help push the story along and are kind of the major plot points in that movie. So yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody will be coming out hopefully the following week. Not this Monday, but the Monday after that. And then once I get that one done, I will continue on and keep pressing. We'll get to see what those are. So that's kind of a little behind the scenes of what's been going on with the podcast itself. As I mentioned, I've been busy on the other side, and a big part of that is a little creative agency that a couple of buddies of mine and I are spinning up, and so that's been taking a lot of time. I'm really kind of getting in that way. Which, by the way, if you guys need any creative work, social, video, photo, web, uh, podcast, of course. So anyway, that's kind of been outside the podcast space, but still, it's a matter of time and really going into that. So that's really kind of what's been going on with the podcast as of late. I've just kind of been keep on keeping on. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the shows, and I will try to do these little updates maybe a little more often. I like the idea of doing them kind of on the off weeks, um, as opposed to trying to do them every week. The catch to that, as I mentioned before, really boils down to my timing. So doing this on a Friday afternoon because I had a few moments that I could do that. You'll notice the video quality is a little different. I don't have I used um, my camera on a shoot, and so I don't have that set up right now. So I'm just using a webcam. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much kind of all I had to say. The last thing I figure would be kind of fun to go over would be the tech side of the show. That's a request that or question that gets asked of a lot of podcasts, and I've had that asked as well. So you'll notice the mic that I have here. This is the mic that I actually use for the podcast itself. And so this is a Rode NT1 mic, and this is a condenser microphone. And one thing about condenser microphones is that if you go into any podcast group or if you're familiar with podcasting, a lot of people will tell you a condenser microphone is the worst type of microphone you can get to create a podcast. And they're not 100% wrong on that, but the reason for that is really because condenser microphones can pick up a lot of noise. So if I were to, have noise going on in the background, this would be a lot more likely to pick it up than what is typically recommended for especially beginning podcasters, which would be a dynamic microphone. Dynamic microphones really have kind of a cone. If you think of a cone, depends on the type of microphone, kind of what shape that is. But think of like a cone, or here's a good metaphor. Think of like a flashlight, right? So a flashlight is going to put a spotlight in a particular area, right? As opposed to an overhead light that you turn on in your house, a fluorescent light that's going to go everywhere. So kind of like that, where this is going to pick up a lot more, whereas the dynamic is really going to focus. So you kind of have to get right in on it. There's two primary reasons why I chose to go with a condenser microphone like this one instead of a dynamic microphone. One of them is with a dynamic microphone. If you do this, if you start moving around like this, it's going to sound like you're going in and out. It's because of that cone that it's keeping. And so I can, when I'm doing the show, and I kind of tend to get into it, right, and kind of move around a little bit, and I don't want to have the volume of my voice change depending on where I'm located. So that's part of it. Another part of it is, I guess I said there were two, so this would be three. So one is kind of being able to move around. The other is that condenser microphones can actually get a little better sound. Personally, I think it gets a little bit better sound, a little bit more range, and then in the post-processing for the episode, I'll crunch that down and level a lot of that out. But I have more information there to begin with to work with in the editing side. Now, the catch to that, of course, as I said, is that it'll pick up a lot more noise. So in order to combat that, the room that I record in is carpeted. You'll notice back here I have these set up. So these are actually moving blankets that I purchased and hung up all around my room. And then I have some audio dampening as well that will kind of catch a lot of that. And so that really helps keep background echo and things like that. The flip side of that then is, there are some things you can't control. So a plane flies overhead. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, and they make noise. And so that's the benefit of doing a pre-recorded show as opposed to a live show, is that if the dogs bark in the background, I just re-record. I just stop and wait for them to be done, or depending on what they're barking at, I go check it out, and then I'll come back and keep recording. If you've seen any of the videos that I've put up on YouTube where I've recorded the entire session, you'll see some of those kind of behind the scenes aspects of that. The last thing, so I said there were 3 reasons for the microphone. One of them is being able to move around. The other one is I like the sound that comes out of this a little bit better than a dynamic microphone. And then the third one, and really this is probably the most important one, is that I got this for half off. So this essentially, I used to do a different podcast before based on a true story. And so this was the microphone that I used for that, and then that was for a company that I worked for, and then there was downsizing, and my entire department got let go. And as a part of that, the podcast that I was producing for the company was no more, and so they didn't have a need for the microphone anymore. So I asked them if I could buy it from them, and they gave me a good price. It was less than half, I think, because they weren't going to do anything with it. So I purchased it from them. So it was a great deal to be able to get this microphone and the arm and all that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, so the Rode NT1, and then you can't see it, but it's off over here. Maybe I'll show that in a future video if you're curious and kind of see how that setup is. But this then runs into a Zoom R16 board, and that is both a mixer and an audio interface in one. And really, I don't use the mixer portion of it because there's just me. In the previous podcast that I was a part of, there were multiple. I had a co-host and we would have guests, and so that's why we got that board, because that was a really really nice board there, and I got that one along with the mic as well. That I purchased that, so that goes into the R16, and then the R16 just plugs in USB to a computer. And I used to use this computer behind me. This is my desktop, my custom build desktop here. But I ended up going out and I went to Best Buy and I found an open box refurbished. I think it was $200 for an all-in-one computer. And that's what I used to record on, because audio processing really doesn't take that much. Most of it kind of gets handled through, a lot of it will get handled through the board, and then by the time it gets to the computer, there's really not that much that it takes. So it doesn't really require a powerful computer. But the benefit of that is that I was able to get everything set up, and then I just come in, I sit down, and I record when I'm ready to record. And so I don't have to worry about changing settings or doing anything of that. And then when I'm done, I do all my editing. All the actual final editing I'll do on the more powerful computer, but the actual recording process, it's all set up and I don't have to touch it. It's really really nice to be able to do that. So yeah, that's pretty much my my podcast recording setup. It's really not a lot to it as far as that's concerned. I have more bells and whistles. You'll notice if you look right here. Let me see if I can get on that right there. So that's another microphone. I don't use that for the podcast, but I use that for tutorials, because I also do online tutorials. And so that's a lot easier while you're using the keyboard and mouse. So I have an array of microphones that I'll use for different purposes. That was another one that I got used for. What did I pay for that? No, I don't even think I paid that much for it. 10 or $20, if that. Actually, you know what? No, that's a different one. Never mind. I'm sorry. I didn't pay for that one. Someone gave that one to me. So even better. Yeah, I have, like I said, I have a couple other microphones kind of sitting around here that I've gotten over the years, and some of them have been I haven't paid full price for any of them. They've all been used, or in good condition, but used, or things like this where get them for really cheap. So that is, yeah, that's my podcast setup. That's kind of behind the scenes there for that. If you have any questions about that, or really anything in the rest of it, I mean, I was actually thinking maybe on the next video, maybe we can chat about the tutorial a little bit. It's not really based on a true story, but it kind of is, because realistically, creating those tutorials is how I pay for this equipment in order to create the podcast. I'm blessed with some great supporters that help on Patreon to support the show. But realistically, some of the costs go above and beyond that. And so that's where the money from creating tutorials comes in. And my background is in creating tutorials, so that's not really a side. That's not really I just randomly decided that one day. That's something that I've been trained on and done for many, many years. All right, so that's all there is for this little live stream here. I'll try to hop back on maybe here in a couple weeks or before then, or maybe after then. We'll see how the timeline goes. But of course, you can always find me over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. You can email me any questions that you have, and I'll include them in the live stream or answer them on there, or maybe just answer directly depending on what that question is. And you can do that at dan@basedonatruestorypodcast.com, or you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Dan Lefebvre, DANLEFEB. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate that. I'm psyched that in 2018 was the year that the podcast surpassed 1 million downloads, and it's just gone crazy since then. Or I guess I should say listens, because some of them, depending on the platform, are streams and not actual downloads per se. So I should say listens, not downloads. But anyway, thanks so much. I appreciate all of that. And until next time, bye for now.